let Richard get started here. So every session, we may have different instructors. We pull a lot of people from their different industry backgrounds. Really excited to have Richard here today. He has a really cool background. He's actually currently an engineer at Google, but I think I'd love, Richard, for you to take a little bit of time and tell us how you got there, what was your track, and then, take it away, Richard.
Awesome. Thanks for the intro, Tim. Hello, everyone. My name is Richard, and I am, as Tim said, an engineer at Google. I've been at Google for around 3 years now, almost coming up to that 3-year anniversary. And I work on the Google Maps team, specifically on the iOS part. So it's kind of weird that I work on an Apple product, but at Google. My path is not what I would consider to be ideal. Probably like many of you, I didn't code in high school, and I kind of started halfway through my freshman year. So some of you might have a leg up on me already in that way. And I didn't really take it super seriously or know what I wanted to do with it until my junior year, when I started going to hackathons and really applying for internships more seriously. The first few interviews that I had with Google my senior year were very rough. I'm honestly surprised that I'm still here because I thought they would ask me from interview number 1 or interview number 2 or 3. All of them went very poorly. But what ended up happening is they put me in the engineering residency pipeline, which I'm happy to answer any questions about that in the future, which is a bit of a training program and a pathway into a full-time software engineering role at Google. So I started studying for interviews, doing some of the things you guys are doing right now, actually. And I was able to do well enough on my last set of interviews and end up getting a job at Google, where I've been since then. For those of you who are maybe from my school, I'm from the University of Iowa, go Hawks, whatever, like all that stuff. But it's been quite some time. I graduated in 2017. So yeah. At any time in this class, feel free to individually message me. Hopefully the chat doesn't fly by too quickly. And I'll try to answer whatever questions, and there'll definitely be time at the end for me to answer any of your questions about like literally anything. Anything is fair game. If it's about Google, I'll talk to the best of my ability. Some things I'm not legally allowed to talk about, of course, but I'll do my best. And you can always, ask me questions over the Slack channel, DMing me there, or on LinkedIn as well. So before we jump into the content for the week, which is over lists and arrays, I did want to preface by saying there's quite a bit going on in the world right now. I'm sure all of you are quite aware. And at CodePath, we really want to help support you through this material, but also kind of navigating some of these difficult times. If you need like an extension, or you need to to talk to someone about anything at all, we really care for you. So please reach out to us. Any of us on the team are really happy to talk and work through kind of getting through this whole situation together. So just wanted to preface by saying that. So to kick it off, I should probably present my screen. That'd be helpful for you guys to see what's actually going on. Alrighty, can everyone see what's going on? This first slide. Pop chat up as well.
Slides look good to me.
Awesome, sweet. Yeah, I'm still getting a little used to Zoom, but it's pretty good. Cool. Okay, so this week we'll be going over, as I said, lists and arrays. These are some really pivotal and important data structures that you're going to be using, definitely within interviews, as well as in the industry. Like literally today, and my entire day was just manipulating things around arrays. So I promise this is very important to learn. And for some of you, this is not the first time you've heard about lists and arrays. We're going to do a little bit of an intro just to kind of refresh ourselves what they are. And then after, we'll work through 2 problems, one together as a class, and then one in your breakout groups that kind of use these data structures to their advantage. Cool. So in this session, as I said, we're going to go do a quick review. And after that, we'll use the umpire process to solve the largest prime factor problem using a list or array. And then after, we will do the first 3 parts of that, understand, match, and plan for the 10,001st prime. I'm not sure if the TH is correct. And then we'll do the breakout session. You guys will solve the problem in your groups, and then we'll come back together, kind of go over it, and then there'll be time for any questions about the content or anything else after. Cool. All right. So just to kind of give you a bit of a review about what a list or array is, or a preview, you can think of it kind of like a, at its core, what it is a linear group of data, group of elements, basically. So the example I'd like to use is think of your favorite album, whatever that may be, whatever genre, doesn't matter. But that album probably has a song list, right? There's a first song, and there's a second song, and a last song, right? But there's a defined list, and there's an order to them. Like the first is first, obviously, and the last song will be playing last. And those could be each different elements. That's kind of at the core of what a list is. It's just, as it says, it's literally a list. The number of the students in this class, for example, you could arrange all the students in alphabetical order in a list, right? Their order does matter with these data structures. There's another data structure which we'll learn about in the future called a set, where order doesn't really matter as much. But we can really use the ordering to our benefit, as we'll see today. What's really important to know is that you can create lists, you can access elements in a list, you can add elements at the ends of lists or insert them and remove them, kind of manipulate data all around. There's some technicalities with arrays, like whether or not they're mutable. For the sake of this class, because we're using Python to demo, we're gonna only explore like lists in Python. But the important thing to understand is the linear nature and how that we can store data in them. I'm happy to elaborate on this at any time as well. Cool. Any questions about lists or arrays before we jump into this problem together? Okay, I'm going to take the consensus in chat. One person asked, Google uses arrays or lists. It's a bit language dependent, I think. I think people who, like in Python, I think lists are a lot more prevalent to use because it's kind of built into language better. As a person who works in the iOS code, I use arrays a lot more than lists. So it's kind of dependent on the language. There's a use case for every. There's an advantage and disadvantage to each type as well. I think most people are. Most of the questions have. Most people are saying we're good to go. So I think we'll keep going. Again, please feel free to DM me and I'll try to catch up as best as possible. This first problem is the largest prime factor. We have this huge number. I'm not even going to try to pronounce it, say what the number is, but it's 60085, right? And we want to find out what the largest prime factor of that number is. Before that, we see, as an example, the prime factors of 13,195 are 5, 7, 13, and 29. So for this 13,195, we would return 29, right? But let's really use the umpire process to our advantage and understand the problem we are being given. So what is the prompt? It's kind of right in front of you. You see, what is the largest prime factor of the number? And we have an example as well to help us out. What key actions do we need to take within the prompt? Well, we need to find out what the largest prime factor of this certain number is, right? It's giving us one specific case, but when we design our solution, we could even be a bit more, give a better solution and generalize it to any number we get. What is the input? Well, what would the input be in chat? Can someone type what the input would be here? Okay, the number. Awesome. Yeah, so I think, and someone hasn't put the, into the next one is what data type is the input? It's an integer, right? Because we're talking about prime factors, we can assume that it'll be a whole number in this case. What is the output? In chat, feel free to spam it. Okay, so a few people have put a list, and some people have put largest prime factors, but we really do want just the one largest prime factor. And that's all we're looking for. And the data type of the output is also integer, as many people have, kind of already given me. And what is the format of the output? I think a single number would suffice in this case. So to answer this question, I think it'd be really sufficient just to write a function that takes one number, which is your, whatever number you're trying to find the largest prime factor of, and returns one number, which is the largest prime factor of that number. Both of those being integers in this case. Isn't that a long? I think this one actually will probably be a long. I am a little hazy on what's the max value of Python, but in general, yeah, it's a whole number basically. Because Python is, the typing is we don't need to specify that in the function. I think we can probably work with both in this case. Hopefully our solution will be general enough to do that. Okay, so match. Have we seen problems like this before? I already kind of shown you one, but have we seen any problems like this before? Counting primes, yes, is prime. Okay, so general like finding primes, whether something is prime. Yeah, so we have these. So, testing if something is prime, the sieve of Eratosthenes, the thing where you have a number and you're trying to find the primes underneath of it by eliminating the composite numbers like as you go along, basically. And then a process of repeating a process for a sequence of numbers, basically. So using for loops and while loops like that. So we can kind of think back to those problems and think of the techniques that we use there and hopefully apply some of those to make this a little bit easier because we've already had the experience of doing those problems before. And then before we kind of get coding and figuring out our algorithm, planning, right? So can we think of some test cases that might be good for this problem? Before chat just like randomly spams all these numbers at me. Basically here is like, okay, with a number this big, right, it's going to be hard to mentally calculate that and figure it out. Thank you for people who have done that already. So like 12 and 25, right? These are small numbers that we can kind of mentally figure out so we can confirm that our answers are going to be right. And while we try to mentally figure out, we can kind of use the process we do mentally to maybe implement an efficient algorithm that way or as a good starting point. So numbers like 12, 25 are great. You don't want to pick numbers like 1 or 0 in this case because these are numbers that are going to be edge cases. You want to keep those in mind, but you also want to pick ones that will work for the general as well. Picking one that is small enough, not 1 or 2, just as I said. Mentally determine the answer if possible. In this case, we can't, unless you're like genius, the genius of geniuses, you're not going to be able to look at that number and just know what the largest prime factor of that is. So that's why we use the smaller ones. Write out all the input data manually. And we'll see in the replit that I've kind of done this in kind of the prints functions that we'll be doing at the end. And then manually performing the steps, talking out loud the decisions. So this is kind of the planning phase. Oh, this is what they call the planning phase, right? Of figuring out what steps we need to do to get the answer we want. And then writing down all the steps you took to get to that, right? And then we just kind of scale n and see if it applies there as well, right? The sieve of Eratosthenes sounds like a mission out of AC Odyssey. I don't actually know what that is. So sorry, maybe I'm a boomer, I'm not sure. Okay, so let's take 12, for example, right? What is the largest prime factor of 12 in the chat? Okay, so 3. Everyone's saying 3. Good. And then how can we figure that out, right? From a bit more of like a algorithmic approach. By what process do we know that 3 is the answer here? Okay. So a bunch of people are saying creating a list of factors, basically, right? I think, yeah, that's a great start. If we create a list and specifically of the prime factor, if we do the prime factorization of 12, we could obtain a list of all the prime factors, and then what can we do there? We just get the largest one, right? So would that work for this bigger number, right? I think that makes sense, right? If we just keep breaking this huge number down into all of its prime factors, and just pick the largest one, then that would be the largest prime factor, right? So someone is saying have the input and then try to find the primes in that path. That could be a bit of an optimization because after all, like 2 is going to be, if it's an even number, right? 2 will be a prime factor of that. And then once you divide by 2, which we'll kind of see in the implementation we'll do in a sec, then you have fewer numbers to compare, right? So these are things like optimizations we can do to maybe make this program run a bit more efficiently. But to start, let's just kind of get some solution going. So I have a replit open. And we already have some of the test cases. I've already done 5, 25, and this is the number, and then our huge number. And I've also included what the answer should be, what we should be seeing for these lines as well. So let's start by just creating the method function and the signature. So def Largest prime factor. And what do we want to take in? We want to take in one integer and we'll call it n for now, right? I'm just going to read the chat to answer some of these questions as well. If divided by 12 and is prime, add to the list. Yeah, so basically, again, we're looking for kind of two things here. If it's a prime number, and it's also divisible into the input number. So if it's a factor of it, right? We want both of those to be true, and then we pick the largest of those. How would arrays work with prime factors, since that's infinite, but arrays are a certain length? So if when arrays are in most languages considered to be immutable, so you cannot actually change the length of an array, but you can add one and then create a new array basically. And it's similar. I think for the sake of this class, we should not be super concerned about runtime as well as space efficiency. Those are topics that we'll actually talk about in the later half of the course and are extremely important in interviews. But for now, I think getting comfortable with these data structures is the more important thing. So, and again, happy to answer questions about this in the future as well. Cool. So what do we want to do? I'll add a comment. We want to break down n into all prime factors, then pick the largest. And this really is let's go here, because it's what the function does, right? So to start, let's see. So how do we break it down into its prime factors, right? Python just makes code lit. I agree. Python is pretty lit. So if we start from the lowest possible prime factor, 2, if we check if n is divisible by 2, and if 2 is indeed prime, then we can move on to the next value. Well, we can divide 2 into that number because we know that it's as the prime factorization of list of all of the prime factors, we know that that's going to be one of them. So we can safely divide it into n and then check again to see how many times 2 goes into n. When we've exhausted 2, we can go into the next potential prime factor, or prime number, which is 3, and do the same thing basically. And by repeatedly dividing our n by our potential prime factors, we can break it down into a smaller and smaller number until we get all of the prime factors of n, right? Richard is the GOAT, TYSM. I probably shouldn't use acronyms like that. Okay, so does anyone have questions about what I just said, like this kind of process of breaking down n into this? Would it be foolish to store all the prime factors into an array? So great question. This is something I was going to say at the end of this problem, but just a little teaser is you don't actually need an array necessarily to solve this problem, and I'll explain kind of why at the end. But for now, for the sake of kind of using the data structure and understanding how it works, I think we should use it, and we can talk about why it might not be necessary and then some of the advantages and disadvantages at the end. Okay. You have to check if a number is prime or not, right? So you would, except because we're starting from 2 and going up, right? So let's say we want to check if maybe 2 is in it and we divide it by 2 all the time, right? And so 2 doesn't divide into n anymore. Well, we know that 4 cannot divide into whatever's left over because 2 has already exhausted all of those. So that is actually allows us to not have to do the prime check. We could still do the prime check for 4, right? Or any composite number or every number, but it actually is a little bit less efficient. And we can I'll even implement like a prime checking helper function just to show you that it will actually give us the same thing back and forth. Okay, let me explain again. So if we take n, and I'll use replit kind of to type it out. Let me also make this bigger in case people can't see. So if we take let's say n is 24, right? Yeah, good number. Okay. So if we want to store all the prime factors in a list, this will become 2 by our algorithm. So and then we divide n by 2 because we just extracted it out. So it becomes 12. And then we can divide 2 again, and it becomes 6. And we can divide 2 by 2 one more time, and it becomes 3. This is actually a bad example because it doesn't actually go back down. We don't get to 4 in our process. But let's say we were stop even, we stop here and we skip 3 for some reason. 4 won't divide into it anymore because we've already divided 4 out via the previous prime factors. Cool. All right, so let's get started with an algorithm here. I wanna, so let's see. So, so potential prime factor, right? So a very long variable name. We're going to initialize it at 2. This is as we iterate, up until we get to the largest prime factor, complete factorization of n. We'll just keep incrementing that or adding it to our list of prime factors, basically. One sec. Okay, good. So let's see. And what is our ending condition here? When will we know, based on this value, if, or actually, even based on n, when will we know if n is completely prime factorized? Someone says, I hate math. I think that math is not the most fun thing in the world, but as in the software development space, using math is often a very effective way of making things more efficient, making things improved speed-wise or memory-wise or anything like that. So if you don't like math, I would encourage you to like math enough to solve problems at least. Okay, so people are saying when the number is prime itself, when the remainder is not 0 or is 0, or one of them you can't divide factors out anymore. I think that a sufficient time. I mean, there's a few different ways we can put this, but really, let's say potential prime factors is greater than or equal to n, right? Or greater than n, let's say, right? Then you can't divide potential prime factor into n anymore, right? So then we would kind of be done there. Maybe we need to clean up the last value, or maybe until n is 1, right? Because eventually potential prime factor should equal n. By the way, we're dividing n, dividing it into n. So when potential prime factor is 1, that could also be a stopping point, right? Cool. So while potential prime factor, let's just for now do is less than n. What will we do here? We want to check if if potential prime factor is divisible into n evenly. Equals 0. So in the case that it is, what do we want to do if it's divisible? Break. Okay. So remember, we're starting with 2 here. We want the largest prime factor. So one person says divide. We do want to divide, and another person says add it to the list. Yeah, we want to do both of those things. So let's do that. Let's create a list called prime factors and initialize it to an empty list. And this is how you do that in Python. We want to divide n into, divide potential prime factors into n. So that's one thing. We also want to add it to the list. We can do that using the .append within Python. Okay, cool. So that's if it is divisible into. What if it's not, right? What if we have like 26 and we're trying to see if 5 is divisible into 26? Okay, we say increment. That's correct. We want to then add one potential prime factor and then go to the next number and check that one, basically, right? Some people say, should we write out special cases like 0 or 1 or wait till the end? I recommend, we're going to kind of model this like an interview, that you do that first, because especially in the, when an interview, when you're so like kind of busy figuring out the problem, and usually it's like pretty difficult, you might forget about those things. So it's really good to just figure those out initially, and just write them down or whatever and get them out of the way so you can focus on the crux of the problem. So why don't we just do that real quickly? What are the special cases for this problem? And let's assume n, you can assume that n is an integer. How about that? And apologies for this. Yes, this statement here is the same as this statement. It's a little shorthand of writing it. You can do this with any operator, the plus, minus, and multiply in Python. 0 and 1. I will attempt to slow down a little bit as per the chat. I'm maybe talking a little fast, apologies for that. Well, I just want to get through the content in time for you guys to have enough time to work on the other problem. As always, I will be uploading the deck as well as the replets that we're doing today to the Slack channel, so you can look at them and ask me any questions about them if you want. So they're all also there. Okay, so 0 and 1, as many people have said. So let's address them. And we, let's assume that we're not getting a negative number. If n is equal to 0 or n is equal to 1, I mean, we could also just do this if n is less than 2, right? Let's say we just return none in this case. If this was an interview, I would recommend asking the interviewer what you should do in this case. Don't, like, you can assume sometimes, like this one, I think it's fine to assume none, but you might also want to ask just to confirm. But this is actually a really good point to call out your edge cases and make sure you have them. Cool. All right. So we've done this part. While potential prime factor is less than n. Okay. So this should give us a list of prime factors, hopefully. And then what do we need to do once we have our list of prime factors? Turn -1 from the list, search and find the greatest, find the max, find them. Okay, cool. So yeah, let me go back to this append. So append is the function name, like literally does what it like implies with the word, right? You have a list of prime factors, right? And it starts out as empty, but we're going to now append whatever is given to it. So in this case, the potential prime factor. So with the example of 12, let's say, if we have 12, when we do this line here, the list starts out as empty, but then it'll become this with one element 2. And then the next time, because we divide by 12, so we have 6, we check if 6 is divisible by 2, it'll become this. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Feel free to ping me if it doesn't. I can kind of go deeper into that. As many people have pointed out, we want to return the largest element, and so some people even, some people have said just return -1. Some people return max. This is a great part about using this array in this case because we're doing it increasingly, like we're incrementing potential prime factor, and it stays in that linear sequence. We can actually benefit from that piece of information and just return the last element. So we could just do this. Python has this handy thing with negative indexing that it'll kind of go in reverse order. So -1 is the last element of this list here. Alternatively, if you didn't want to do this, okay, that's interesting. You could also just return the max by doing this. And this would give you the max value of prime factors. Which one is easier? Which one is better? Technically, I would say that this one is better because we're benefiting off of the fact that prime factors is in ascending order. It's already sorted for us. So we don't need, max will actually take longer because it'll need to figure out which is the max value in the list. And that will kind of come up later down the road in terms of time complexities and all of those things, which don't panic if you don't know about it right now. You will learn it and you'll become very good at it because it's very important. But we can also benefit right now that we can just use -1. And some people are pointing out some things about whether or not we need to use the array or the list, and I will kind of get to that once we see if this works. But let's just hit the run button and see what happens. Okay. Largest prime factor, list index out of range. Okay, so what happened here? Some quick asides. Is it okay to use shortcuts like arrays.sort in interviews? If you know the function, it's usually fair game. You can even, I would actually recommend asking the interviewer if if you're allowed to use it. And if they say yes, then go for it. They might ask you to explain how it works though. In general, people who are interviewing just want to make sure you know what you're talking about before you just use the thing. Okay, so we have a list index out of range error. And this is actually super common working with arrays and lists. Prime factors, -1. This, for some reason, is not returning what we want it to. What might that be? Well, if this is empty, then you can't do a -1 index because there's nothing in there, right? And because not even this line executed, I would presume that the problem lies here. So why don't we use our friend Python tutor to help us out? Not tutorial. Cool. So this is the one we were running. I love Python tutor. I actually did not know this was a thing. This would have been super helpful for me going through college. So I really encourage you to use it because it's very helpful. All right, so we're going through printing. Okay, so we skip our edge case, and we've entered the while loop. Okay, so 2 is not divisible into n, so we skip to the else, we increment, percentage prime factor is 3. Okay, going 4. Okay, now it's 5. Aha, here we go. It's skipping it because it needs to be less than or equal to n. It's actually skipping it when it equals n. So if we pass in a prime number, or if our prime number is last, it will actually skip that one, right? So let's go back to our replit and change this to an equals. The run, there we go. We got 5, we got 13, we got 29, and it looks like this, according to our program, is 6,857. So as we can see here, we used arrays to store all of the prime factors in ascending order for a given number, and then we just take the last one, the largest of them, and return that. That was fire. Thank you very much. Why are we only adding 1 to the potential prime? Great question. So I think you might be referring to, well, do we ever need to check any even number after 2, right? Because it's not going to be prime. It's 2 is divisible into that number, so we don't need to check that. And that would be correct. That could be an optimization we do after we get, after 2 passes, we could then increment by 2 each time. So we can skip over, we don't have to do this check for any even number past 2. So that would be a way to optimize this to run a little bit faster, right? You cannot have an empty list with an index. If the list is like this, you won't be able to do like prime factors of 0. This will give you an error because there's nothing in the list. You can initialize an empty list and then add to it later or use it however you want, but you just won't be able to access anything in it because there's nothing in it. And as some people pointed out, we're not returning -1. This is the last index. So this is, in this case, effectively the same as writing this of length of prime factors -1. So these two things are effectively the same thing here. Yeah. And some people wrote in other languages, but this is the way to do it with Python. Are you allowed to use Python tutor in a technical interview? No, probably not. Yeah, you will. Maybe is the answer, but in my experience, it's a no. You can wish, but hopefully by doing things like taking this course, taking CodePath, and learning how to use these data structures and algorithms really well in whatever language you feel comfortable with, we recommend Python. You'll know those things and be able to recall them off the top of your brain and not have to use Python tutor to dig through your code that way. Cool. Any questions about this? I'm gonna kind of go through some of them. If I don't get your question, I'm really sorry about that. There's a lot going through the chat. Feel free to message me again on LinkedIn or Slack or anything, or probably not this chat platform, but like LinkedIn or Slack, and I'll try to answer your question there as well. Is timing essential to solving these problems? Interviews are time constrained usually they're 45 minutes, and you probably have around 15 to 20 minutes to figure out the conceptual or algorithmic pseudocode solution. So yeah, timing is important. If you look at this problem and we just went through and you're like, whoa, how did he do this? Like, I don't know how to do it. Don't panic. I was there for a very, very long time. It just takes, working at these problems repeatedly, understanding how these data structures work and when to use them, and just practice. And once you get really familiar with these tools, I kind of think like each data structure and algorithm is like a tool you put in your tool belt. So when you go to the interview, they'll give you a problem, and then you can pick out the right tools to try to solve the problem. And the more familiar you are with those tools, the better prepared you'll be for those interviews. I see that a lot of these questions are kind of gearing in towards like the general interviewing and not so much about arrays and lists. So for that reason, we can answer those at the end of the class, and I'll take as many as you guys have. Any questions about this specific problem? Are we going to optimize the solution? I'm going to encourage you to try to optimize it on your own. Again, these replets will be up at the end of class. We don't have the time in class right now to optimize it fully. How are we making sure that the list numbers and lists are prime? So going back to this example, because we're incrementing starting from the lowest prime number and by 1 each time, and we're fully dividing out each prime number from our input, you can guarantee that way that all future numbers that are added to this list will be prime. Because if it's a composite number, that means there was a prime before it that has already been divided into n as much as it can be. So there's no chance for, let's say, 4 or 6 to go into n, because we'd have divided out all the 2's before it. Okay. Could we have used a similar method in solving is prime problem? You could have done something like the sieve of Eratosthenes, or like other ways of finding all the primes. Like you could have found all of the prime numbers underneath n, and then figured out which ones are divisible into n, and they got the largest of those. You could have done that. I actually did that for the pilot, and the reason why I've kind of pivoted to this solution is because that one didn't actually, like Replit ran out of time or space or whatever to compute the value for this largest one. And so I wanted to give you guys a solution that would actually work for these large numbers. As maybe a test of understanding your arrays, maybe you want to try that. That one actually is a little bit trickier because depending on how you remove the potential prime numbers, you might need to do some interesting indexing things with the loops you have. If you're interested in the challenge, give that one a go too. Let's see. Why did we change it to less than equals to n? We changed it because as we solved the case 5, when you increment this, and this is equal to 5 and your n is 5, it won't actually add it to prime factors, and you want it to. So that's why we changed it to less than or equal to n, because we need to account for potentially the last number being n as well. Since we have less than or equal to n, wouldn't the function always just return n? So n actually will become smaller and smaller as we iterate through in this while loop. So it won't return the original n. And because we don't know what the final value of n will be, we we can't just, return n as our answer, right? That'd be like returning this as the answer for this whole problem, which would not be correct. Okay, I'll take probably 2 more and we'll kind of go into the next one. Again, if you have questions, hit me up on Slack or link. Cool. Okay, can you explain the line after the second if statement, please? This one here, I think. So this is the same as n equals n divided by prime factor. And sorry if I'm using Python that's a little new to some people. This is a shorthand way of writing this line. You can actually do the same thing with any other of the basic 4 operators. So if you wanted to, it's like a plus equals 1 here. It's the exact same thing instead of dividing. So if I wanted to multiply n by a number like 5, this is the same as n equals n times 5. Cool. Why are we doing it? Because it follows the logic of trying to only have primes in n and get the prime factorization of n. So by dividing 2 into n, right, we then keep reducing n until it's only left with the prime factors. And once we can't do 2 anymore, we go to 3. And once we can't do a 3 anymore, we go to the next number, which we'll keep incrementing until we actually get to the next prime number, because all of the previous numbers in the composite will have been gone. I think a lot of people are having some questions regarding how this exactly works. I'm happy to kind of chat offline about it. So again, ping me. I'll also try to put a more thorough text explanation for why this works. Again, and this actually kind of leads into what I want to talk about, like, do we actually need to use it right in this problem? The short answer is no. We could actually do this problem if we just kept track of the largest prime factor. We don't, because do we ever use any other value in prime factors besides the last one? We don't, right? Because we have this prime factorization, it's like maybe a bit easier to understand, we have all the prime factors. Now what can we do with those prime factors? We can just get the last one or the biggest one. If we change this problem ever so slightly to return the prime factors of n, we would be set there, right? Or maybe the scope of the problem changes or things around it change, where we want to make it like basically do something with the list of prime factors, for example, like maybe how many prime factors are in, how many unique prime factors are in n, right? That would require us to keep track of which prime factors are in n. So I think, do you need the list in this case? No. Could it be useful? It could be, right? And I think that kind of segues into this point about there's not always one way to solve a problem, especially in programming. There are often many different ways to solve the same problem. And depending on your circumstances or what you're trying to optimize, some will be better than others. So as you move forward with these problems today and for the rest of your career as a software engineer, and especially in interviews, just keep that in mind. Like, you're not just trying to find the answer, you're trying to find the best answer for your scenario, right? Okay. Given the amount of time we have left, we'll kind of go into the next problem. Again, if you have questions, let me know at another time. So we've solved it together. Wonderful. Next up is this problem that you guys are going to tackle in small groups. The 10,000 and first, you can say first prime. So if we list out the first 6 prime numbers, we have 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, and 13. We can see that the 6th prime is 13. But what about the 10,001 first prime number, right? Does anyone know off the top of their head? If you're a genius, maybe you do. But point here is we're trying to figure out what that value is, right? Nah, thank you for being honest. Those of you who have said no. So let's, kind of do the umpire process again. So what is the prompt? It's right in front of you. What key actions you need to take? So in this case, we want to know, we need to figure out what this value is, basically, the 10,001st prime that we've been prompted for. What is the input? So just like the I'm not going to go all the way back because it's animated. Just like the last problem, we are given a specific number, but let's be a bit more let's make this generalize the solution so we could apply it to any number we're given, right? So let's make it, the input would be what? A number with, and what type would it be? An integer or a whole number specifically, because we want to do, so we can't have like, what is the 10,001st.7 prime number? That doesn't really make any sense. So it'll be an integer in this case. What is the output? Probably the same. We're going to give back that nth prime number, and that'll also be an integer in this case. For those that have put it in the chat, what the answer to this problem is, great. But just as it is in an interview, if you were asked this problem in an interview, they wouldn't give you like a passing score if you just gave the answer. We gotta figure out how we get there and show our problem solve. So what is the output? Look at the key actions. We did that. What is the data type? Integer. Awesome. Or a whole number data type in this case. I think more often in interviews, you'll just say an integer is fine. Format, single value. Cool. Have we seen problems like this before? So I would say yes. Feel free to put in the chat if you've seen a problem like this before. Or maybe you've actually seen this problem before, right? But it's another prime number based problem, figuring out if something is prime and also repeating things for a sequence of numbers. For those of you who say no, then this is just like the first problem of this kind of type that you'll be experiencing, and then you can kind of use this for the future problems that get to come. Is it like the last thing we did? It is kind of like the last thing we just did. Saving primes in a list. And let's plan. So I think now individually, before you head off into your groups in just a little bit, try to think of a few test cases that might work well for, testing if your function works. So, they say the 6th prime is 13. I would add that one right away as a test function because you're already given the answer, right? Maybe pick one that's a little bit bigger, but not too big, right? Don't pick like 100. That's going to take, like, if it was an interview, you're going to be burning time trying to manually figure that out. So pick things like 6, maybe 10, something like that. It says pick an n that is small enough, but not the unique cases. For the main part of solving the problem, I would, not do that, but also consider the edge cases when you go to actually code it up, because those are important. For the sake of this session today, I wouldn't worry about those. Focus more on trying to solve the main cases. What is the n you're choosing? We're choosing, well, because the function should be able to handle any n we give it, right? Any integer that we give it that's not one of these, not 0 or less than 0. But for the sake of testing it out, pick things that you can manually confirm, like 2. Anything less than 10, I think, is fair game. You can mentally confirm. Write out all the input data manually. So I would write it down like on a sticky note or like type it up in your Replit ready to go or something like that. And then kind of manually perform the steps. Like how do we know that this 6th prime is 13, right? Then write down whatever you did to get to that answer. And then can you perform that for a larger n? So consider those things as you kind of plan it out. We've done that a little bit now, talking about it, but then you can kind of finish it off and then implement a solution together as in your breakout groups. Just to answer a few questions before we send you off. Is it randomly chosen? So I guess the technical answer is like, yes. You want to write a function that can handle any number that is given to you. So that could be 10,001. That could be 50,000. That could be 4, right? You want it to be able to handle anything that is given to you, given the assumptions you can make about what's given to you. Like we can assume it's going to be an integer. And for the sake of the short time we have today, let's assume it's also greater than 0. Cool. Any questions before we send you off? And if you do have questions, feel free to DM me while you're doing these breakout sessions. Mentors might be here as well. And if they are, definitely lean on them. They know what's going on. They can definitely help you guys out. And yeah, I think we're good to go to breakout rooms. And it's 6:52 Pacific time now. So maybe back at like 7:10. Welcome back. Hope it all went well. I stepped into some groups to kind of see how things were going a little bit. And to group one, where I did kind of probably got chopped off. We can finish the explanation along with everyone else here as to how we can solve this problem. Let's see. All right. So if you can't see my slides, let me know. I think there should be backup. But I actually forgot, in our breakout rooms, we were supposed to, this is my bad, share one stretch you like to do before you start typing. This is a little bit of a silly thing, but I think it's also very important to get the blood flowing, you know, every time you start coding. So I'd encourage you to, you know, get your stretches in while you're coding and doing these problems. So my personal favorite stretch, I'll demonstrate this, is just, you know, going up, oh, my belly, and then you go back down and touch your toes. I'm not very flexible, so I can't touch them, but that's enough for me, and then I get back to work. But yeah, these kind of breaks are really good. I would definitely sprinkle them in as you tackle these problems. Okay, so let's see here, solution review. My Zoom panel is hovering over my Replit tab. Okay, so this, we're gonna remove all of this so you can't see the solutions. Let's start with the function that we're trying to call, right? We need the nth prime, and I actually already have wrote it out. So let's say prime live. And what does it take in? We want to see the nth, you know, whatever n prime. If it's, you know, the 6th prime, that'll return 13. If it's the 10,000 first prime, that'll return something else, right? But this function should be able to do both of those things. Okay, so how can we solve this? Let's think about the way we can use an array or a list to solve this problem. If we, how do we know what the first prime is? Let's start there. Well, we know 2 is the first prime. We just know that, right? So if n is equal to 1, this one would just turn 2. But what about the second prime? Well, we know that 2 is the first. So let's go check the next number, see if that is prime. And if it is, then we can return 3 in this case. What about the third prime? So do the same thing. We know 2 is, we know 3 is. Go to the next number, 4. 4 is not prime, so we don't count that. And we go to the next number, which is 5. 5 is prime, so we return that. So how can we use a list to help us out here? Well, we could create a list of primes. Again, initialize as empty. And we can do our, let's call it potential prime. I like to use the word potential because we don't know, maybe. And we'll start it at 2 because that's the first known prime that we have. Then, and I'll actually just do comments here. So we start with an empty list of primes. The first known prime is 2. I'll have versions of these solutions with comments for everything uploaded to the Slack channel as well after class. So what do we want to do here? We want to add the known primes in ascending order to the primes list until we have n of them, and then we can return the last value, right? So since we don't know how many values we'll be going through, we know the number we need to hit, but we don't know the number of values. We can't really, a for loop would not be as effective here. So let's use a while loop. While what? Can someone in chat give me the termination or the condition while we keep repeating? Awesome. Yeah. So while primes is the size of primes basically is less than n, we'll keep going. We can do that. Something like this. Cool. So we need to add potential prime in if it is prime. Now there are multiple ways we can do this. We could do the, create a helper function. Oof. Oh, I see. Okay. We create a helper function called x prime and implement that, right? What would it be like? For I in range n, right? But we actually need to start at 2. If, and you've done this before, literally, if n mod I is equal to 0, return false. And if it gets through it all, you can return true. So why don't we use, we could use this for now, right? If the potential prime, if is prime of the potential prime, and I'm using parentheses because I'm too used to my own coding language that I use. Awesome. People posting the algorithm in chat. I'm okay with these folders. Good job. Good work. So if it is, we want to add it into our primes list, right? So primes.append potential prime. If it is not, well, let's see. Even if it is, right, we want to then increment the counter, right? So we'll increment our potential prime to the next value. So add 1. Cool. So this will keep going until the length of primes is just full of prime numbers until it reaches this length size of n, basically, right? And then what should we do at the end? We want to return the last value in primes because that's the last one. So we're going to use our -1. Or we could do the max. So do the same thing really in this case. Okay. Let's try it out. So print nth prime live of, let's say 6. You know that. We need to increment in both situations. We do need to increment in both situations. Because of the way we do this, it'll still increment whether or not we append it or not. It works. Nth prime, and let's do our 1001. Why not? Let's add 1 more. Let's add like 3. Cool. I'm going to comment all of this stuff out because this is the solutions I'll upload later. And let's give it a run. So it's taking a little bit. But is the third prime 5? Yeah. Is the sixth prime 13? Yes. What about this one? It's taking a little bit, right? And that's because we have to do this prime check for every single number, basically. And some of them will definitely stop short, but we have to generate 1001 prime numbers, basically. So it is taking slow. Replit will give me like it'll yell at me if it won't finish, basically. But this is obviously taking a long time. We've been here for 20 seconds, 30 seconds, I don't know, right? And it's not great. How can we make this a little bit better? Well, the main bottleneck here is that we have to do this for every single prime number, right? But just like the last problem, we know that we can break down any number into its prime factors, right? So what if, instead of dividing it by every single number, we only divided it by the prime factors? How powerful is my CPU? I think this is Replit, so I'm not sure how they actually run this, but I'm using a pretty not so great laptop. So yeah, you have to check half the numbers. That's another optimization as well. But what if we change this is prime to also take in a list of, I'm sorry about the syntax changes, known primes, or style changes rather, right? And instead of doing this, oops, we did the following. For, let's say, val in list of known primes, if n mod the val is equal to 0. Then you return false. It's still going on, right? It hasn't even finished. We haven't hit stop yet. And then if not, we can return, if not for all of them, we can return true. Change this now to also take in primes. Okay, it hasn't finished yet. Let's give this a go. Okay, so while this runs a little bit, I'll explain the change. So rather than incrementing potentially through a ton of things here, sorry, in this commented out thing, there was an increment through every single number, right? Now we're only incrementing through, oh, it already finished. We are only incrementing through the list of our known primes. And the reason why this works is because you can break down any number into the prime numbers, right? Did you define what the list of unknown prime is consisted of? So the list of known primes, this is the parameter, right? And we're passing in this list of primes, right? It initially is empty, but it'll actually get bigger and bigger the more we append to it, right? So as you can see, it finished a lot faster, right? I mean, it's still not like instant like most things are, but it finished within 15 seconds easily. So by using the array, we're able to actually dramatically speed up how fast this would take. Cool. Yep, so there we have our solution. 104,743 is our 10,001 prime. So this is an example of, you didn't really need to use this to solve the problem, to solve it and get an answer, but to get an answer faster, we're able to use the array, or the list in this case, to get our answer more efficiently and more quickly, right? Any questions about this? What does val represent? So val, in this case, so we have a list, val is each element within list of known primes, and it will go through in the order of the list. It is a temporary value only to be used within the scope of the for loop. Any other questions about this problem? Again, I have a version down here with comments about like the input, the output, what we're doing, all of that. And I'll upload that too. What are we doing in line 7? So we're checking if the current potential prime, as we increment by 1 each time, is prime using our list of already known primes. The session is recorded. Yes, that'll be uploaded, I think, in a few days. Yeah. Is it okay to use libraries to be more efficient? I'm going to give you the interview answer and then the non-interview answer. The non-interview answer is yes, if you're allowed to. Like some libraries you might not be able to use because of, or some like other technologies out there people have made that might like make linear algebra, if you're trying to do that type of thing more efficient. You might have to have a certain license to use them, or like whatever you're building has to like fall under a certain like group of software usages. I think more importantly is interviews. If you know it, ask your interviewer if you can use it. If they say yes, then use it. If they say no, or if they ask you to explain, then you'll have to do those things, right? Simple libraries like math, it'll be like probably a yes. But anything else, just ask if you're not sure. Can I explain lines 14 to 16? So here, we have a list of known primes, and in this case, it's running up to n. Actually, we have a list of known primes through n. We're going to check every single one of those primes and see if our potential prime n is divisible by that number. And if it is, we know it's not a prime. We know that n is not a prime number. How about just math module? Like, yeah, like you could use a math module to solve this problem potentially, or help out optimizing it. It is like, but I think math is usually pretty fair game for interviews. Can we use a while loop in the is prime function in line 13? You can. I say this hesitantly, you can generally use a while loop or a for loop interchangeably depending on how you format things. One will often make a lot more sense. Usually if you know, or if you already know like how many elements we'll be iterating over, a for loop makes more sense. Because we already know how many elements are in list of known primes, for loop makes more sense here. You could alternatively do a while loop with a counter and then use an index for this. You can also use something that's called an iterator that's in most languages, and it'll iterate through basically increment the iterator. That's not as pertinent right now. But yeah, you can generally use both of them. Is the list of known primes the same as primes? So this is a separate function. These are called parameters. So it's what we can pass into it. And then when we actually call the function, these are called arguments. So potential prime is an argument. Primes is the argument we pass into this function. So when we call is primes, list of known primes will be represented by primes since that's what we pass in. Okay, I'll take probably a few more questions and then open it up to any other questions. If statement line 15. This is checking if our passed in number, so in this case, it's our potential prime, is divisible by each prime number in our list of known primes, and divisible as in like the remainder is 0. Why not use the square root for line 15? Can you and if I mispronounce any of your names, I'm so sorry. Razo, can you explain what do you mean by use a square root there? Like on which thing? Can you show with the original definition of it is prime? The original definition is just down here. I'll put it all in comments. This was the original. We didn't pass in a list to help us. We just did it this way. And it took a really long time. It didn't even finish in the time I was explaining it. So this is a bit more efficient in our case. Cool. So regarding this being empty, if you execute a for loop over an empty array, it will not even enter, it will not do anything here. And let me show you that actually using our great friend Python tutor, everyone's favorite. You don't have to print, but whatever. Nth prime 5 of 6. Cool. So as we go through it, okay, so we're calling is prime now, right? N is equal to 6, which is our input. 2 is our potential prime still, and we jump down now to we've called is prime. So we start the for loop. List of known primes is an empty list. So what happens? Watch the red arrow. It skips it all. It doesn't even check anything, right? And because is prime is then true and returns true, go back here and we append it, and now primes is equal to a list with one element 2. Okay. The square root of n, if the value of the array is divisible by that, then it can't. Be prime. What I'll say about using square roots with some of these prime things, and like especially because you can optimize using that, like it certainly is possible to to speed this up even more, right? If you look up this problem, actually, there are some weird mathematical ways of making this as fast as possible. If you're into that type of thing, I'd encourage you to check it out. The focus today is really on using arrays and making them helpful for you and knowing when you can use them, when you don't necessarily need to use them, but they might be helpful, and general usage with them, as well as the problems that we'll be doing outside of this to help you kind of become more familiar with them. Oh, no worries, man. So kind of wrapping up here. So I wanted to reiterate a few things that have come up. One thing is about like using languages. So some of you are pretty new to Python, and that's 100% fine. want to stress that we've chosen to use Python in this class to keep the teaching kind of consistent. We're all using the same language when we teach. And according to Liz, our lead instructor, Python has been shown to be the most successful in terms of people interviewing. So that's what we want you guys to succeed at interviewing, so you can get those internships and get their started on your career that way. That being said, I did all of my interviews in Java, and if you feel a lot more comfortable or like a certain language a lot more, that's 100% fine, right? There's not a perfect language out there. We recommend Python for the reasons I gave, but it's also 100% fine if you do in Java or C++. I'd really recommend one of those three because those are the three main ones in terms of interviewing, but you could also, choose another one if you'd like. And think about learning these languages like you would learn any language, right? You don't have to just know English or like just know Spanish, right? You can learn a lot of them and be better with certain ones of them and be worse with certain ones of them. But I would at least be really, really good in one. JavaScript is also fine. In terms of interviewing, I'd probably stick with the C++, Java, Python, but like JavaScript is really well used too. Okay. And I want to go back to this solution because one person asked a problem about shouldn't it be n+1? Well, so if we're looking for, let's say, the first prime, right? If we start with 2, 2 will be added. So then the length of primes will be 1. And if we did n+1, then we'd actually get the second one. So it'd be 1 over now. So we want to keep it as it is right now. And that's why we do these test cases, because we know the third prime is going to be 5, and we can see that it's 5. So that kind of verifies that we're correct here. Yeah, so just to wrap up the session, arrays and lists, they're very important. If you don't encounter an array or a list in your programming interviews or in your program, software engineering careers, I would be shocked. Like, I would bet a lot of money that you will actually encounter them at some point. And they're very useful for a reason. They're very widely used for a reason. So if you feel really unsure about the material we covered today, don't worry. Like, you're learning it now, maybe for the first time, and you'll be doing some problems and continuously practicing, even past this class, with using these data structures. So just really have faith that if you put in the time and the effort into practicing these and learning them, you will kind of get a mastery of them. So yeah, before the next session, I would encourage you to start your problem sandbox today, and then also watch some of the problem solving videos. You can review this lecture, and I'll also have the replets up as well, so you can look at them and all the comments that I've added to kind of explain what's going on where. Yeah, and with that, there's some questions being posted. If you posted already, can you please just repost it? I think I'll kind of end the main discussion there. If anyone has any questions for me about anything now, feel free, like anything you want. Interviews, Google, this material, obviously I'm happy to talk about the material more. And for those who don't necessarily need to stay around, feel free to dip out and do whatever you need to do. But I'm around you can even unmute if you want and ask questions that way as well. So cool. I'll start reading the ones that I see. Are we heavily scored on process thinking rather than solution? I'm assuming this is in terms of technical interviews. I can only say what I personally do as an interviewer for Google. I think it's a lot more important that you get it's a lot more important that I see your problem solving process and it's robust, and that you're thinking and like a software engineer than just getting the solution, right? Because if you just do a lot of problems, you can get to a point where you might be able to regurgitate your solution because you've done it already before, right? But I want to know why that solution is good. I want to know how you got to the solution. How can we make it better? Chances are, if you give me the correct answer quickly, I'm going to ask you questions about it. I'm going to really dig into it, make sure you understand it. And if you do those things, then I'll be like, okay, let's take this scenario now, and I'm going to change the problem to see how you can adapt to that and how you can modify your solution to be the best possible given constraints. So it's a lot more about your problem solving process than the solution. I like to say a software engineering interview is more like a discussion where you're leading me down the path of how we get to the solution and coding it up for me. And I am just kind of like, helping, give constraints to the problem. But it really is more of this like two-way street. So it's not so much as like a test, if you Can I post the solution code? I will post it after this session is over, as well as any other like relevant links that we talk about in this kind of like Q&A thing now. Can I pass my LinkedIn profile? Yes, I will attach my LinkedIn profile to that comment as well in the Slack channel soon. Is there anything that makes Google interviews unique or different? It's hard to say because there are so many companies doing software engineering interviews. Whether or not they're the best way of assessing software engineers is personally not on behalf of Google. This is my opinion. I don't know if that's like the best way. I think it's, we focus a lot on data structures and algorithms because it's kind of a uniform thing that you'll probably need to do in a lot of engineering roles at Google. A lot of other companies do the same. A lot of companies do the 45-minute interview too. So I'm sure there's some things that we lean more into in terms of like our hiring, but the interviews are probably pretty similar, I'd say. If you're applying for higher up positions, we will have special interviews or like a tailored positions. So like if you're applying for a machine learning role, you're gonna have at least 1 or 2 machine learning specific interviews. What were my interview questions? NDA, cannot say. Job position says it prefers people with experience in Java, Python. Is it better to use that language? If they say they're allowed, like you can code in these languages, code in one of those languages, right? A lot of times they'll say, please pick Python, Java, or C++, primarily because the interviewers, there are more interviewers at the company who know those languages, so they can vouch for whether or not you know what you're doing. So I would try to stick to whatever the application allows. How bad is it if you can't figure out how to optimize a solution? It's not the end of the world. I have given like recommending higher remarks to people who don't figure out the most optimal solution if I think their problem solving process is super, super robust and I have confidence that they're gonna make a good software engineer. We look for those skills that we can see transfer into the day-to-day job. So while it's better if they do get the optimized solution and can explain it, it's not the end of the world if you don't. Does Google have a program for sophomore, junior interns? We have a program for freshmen and sophomore interns. Freshmen and sophomores called it used to be called the engineering practicum. The name has changed, but if you search for engineering practicum, you'll probably get the same program. That is only for freshmen and sophomores. So if you're in that group, it's a summer internship. So if you were a freshman or a sophomore and the summer before this summer, I would apply to those because those are only for freshmen and sophomores. Otherwise, we have general internships for anyone in school for bachelor's degree, master's degree, PhD, all those things. You recommend learning and switching to Python even though you have more experience in Java? I'm gonna say the phrase I like to use. I did study abroad in Spain for a little bit, so I know some very little bit of Spanish. But like, ¿por qué no los dos? Right? Why don't you learn both? Because I think both will serve you well. I would definitely get really good at one. Like, know how to do everything you can in one of them, and then the other one could be like a good fallback, right? At least to carry you through interviews, because eventually you learn that the concepts in all these languages are pretty similar. Some are better at certain things, and then if you have the opportunity, you can pick the ones that make the most sense. But really, like, the concepts transfer across languages very well. Like, pretty much all programming languages have some concept of this sort of raise, right? So try to, why not do both? If you're time constrained, if you're really confident in Java, then maybe keep doing Java. But like, we recommend Python just because people tend to have more success with it. How many languages do you think a software engineer should really know well? For your sake, in terms of interviews, I'm going to say again, one. Just make sure you know one really, really well. And just like a regular language, like I haven't practiced my Spanish in so long, so I'm probably garbage at it now. But like, I use Objective-C a lot on my work, on the day-to-day work, right? So I know Objective-C super, super well. And if I start working on a different team that does use Objective-C, I'm going to forget about it. And I'll have to like look up guides again, maybe when I go back to it. So it's kind of a rotating mix maybe on what you're working on, but I would say at least one. How many personal projects did you do having a resume before you applied to Google? I think I had 3 or 4. Most of them are from hackathons, actually. So I think that's a great way of getting projects out. Obviously, hard to do hackathons in this time, but there's online hackathons too. And I think really anything to show your passion is helpful. As a bit of a side tip, I would spend some time really polishing your LinkedIn and making it as good as it can be, because that's how Google actually reached out to me, because they looked at my LinkedIn and like they wanted to potentially hire me. So I'd spend some time brushing that up. What level of requirement in terms of data structures that we should focus on leading up for the I think it's called the S-step interview. The more, the better. I don't believe we have a data structures requirement for, if the STEP program is the same as the EP, I don't believe we have a data structure requirement, but you should double check on the site of what the requirements are. If it does say data structures and algorithms, which I don't think it does, then I would know them pretty well. In general, the more you know, the better. So I wouldn't worry too much about it. Do interviewers actually run the solutions for on-site interviews? Generally, no. I don't personally, because as an interviewer, you should have enough mastery with the language you can look at it and know what's wrong with it. That being said, the code you write at Google, at least for the regular software engineering interviews, should compile. Like you should be good enough with the language where it compiles. If you miss a semicolon here and then you're using Java, I'm not going to be like, whoa, this is like, it's like if you're whiteboarding especially, like it's fine, right? But you should be using the right method names. You should be using the right syntax, all those things. How long are Google interviews? They're 45 minutes usually, just like a lot of interviews in the industry. Usually it's like 5 minutes of intro, 5 minutes of questions that you can ask us, and then at the end, and then the middle 35 is like solving 1 to 2 problems, basically, coding. What is the most telling on someone's resume? We can answer resume like tips and tricks at some point. But as a student, the most important thing is is their education section. You need to have it, I would have it in like bold when you're expected to graduate and also what degree you're going for. And that should be the first thing underneath like your name and contact information in your resume, because as a recruiter, the first thing you look for is like, is this person eligible for the position they're applying for? And oftentimes they need to see, like, if you're trying for internship, they need to know you're going back to school after the internship is over. So, and they also need to know what degree you're going for. So your education is like the most important part of your resume as a student. Once you become an engineer or whatever, then maybe your experience comes first. But as long as you're a student, education, in my opinion, should be number one, unless you have something ridiculously impressive that should go before it. But like even that, they want to make sure you're eligible first. So can we reapply to Google if we fail the interview for the first time? Yes, I think they say well, how soon you can reapply to Google. As a side bit, I got rejected from Google twice. I made it my third time. I know people who have gotten their first time. I know people have gotten their 8th time. It's just remember, like with anything, with all these like job pursuits, you only need to succeed one time. Like you can fail over and over and over again, but you only need to succeed one time and then you're good to go. So keep that in mind. LMAO, NDA, I agree. Do you recommend practicing whiteboard with friends for practice? Yes. I didn't actually interact too much with like my fellow students because I was actually more into like the music. I was also like a music major through school. But I think it's really helpful to practice with your friends in school who are also doing these, software engineering interview practices, because from when you're administering the interview, you can see what is going wrong. Like you can see what's going well, what's going wrong. And from that, you can like, learn, oh, I should do this, or oh, I should not do that. So it's kind of like the whole like learning by teaching thing. Plus it's good practice for talking out your solution, which is not always the easiest thing to do. Wait, if you're a sophomore for this summer, should apply to practicum. You can apply to the regulatory internship if you want at any level in school. If you were so it's too late for this current summer, like one we're in right now. But if you're a sophomore in starting August, you can apply for the STEP internship program for Google for the next summer. So it'll be the summer between your sophomore and junior year that you're still eligible. For what it's worth, I think Microsoft also has a similar program, and Facebook probably does. A bunch of larger tech companies probably have similar programs too. So I'd really encourage, because I really want you, like, it'd be great if you guys came to Google, but I also want you guys to, be successful wherever you go. So, look around, apply to as many as you can that you think is worthwhile. How are interviews assessed? There is a rubric. We read on certain things. Every larger company has a certain rubric because, you want to keep candidates standardized. And we do look at things like coding. We look at things like your problem-solving abilities. We look at things like, how well, the skills that you would need in a software engineering role. So like, can you communicate properly? Those types of things, right? I don't want to share Google's exact rubric with you because I'm probably not allowed to, but there is some rubric, so there's some standardization that occurs. Can you look at Google search engine during interview? This is the same thing as like, can you use libraries? Ask your interviewer. Maybe they'll allow it in certain circumstances. I don't think you need to usually. And if anything, that might be a hamper on you because it's going to take away your time. 35 minutes is not a long time, not a lot of time to figure out a solution to a problem and also code it up. So like, probably not as my answer. Rich out here speaking Spanish. I wish, seriously, I'm so bad at it now. Why not Swift? Many large apps, as Carlos says, yeah, thank you. Many large apps were written in Objective-C before the switch. So it's hard to move millions of lines of code to a different language. There are also some, and I don't know the differences very well, so my bad on that one, but there are some advantages to keep it in Objective-C. There might be a day when Apple decides like no more Objective-C, and then we'll need to switch. But while we have it, not even Google, other companies do use Objective-C still as well. How do you make a good LinkedIn? I would look up a guide on this. I did my best on my own without a guide. You don't need to use mine as an example. There are many people who have thought about how to make a good LinkedIn for a software engineer who have made great articles about it. I would encourage you to use Google search or whatever search engine you prefer to find a good article on how to craft it as a student, especially looking to get an internship. Yeah. Most online courses about data structures and algorithms are taught in C++ and Java. How can you learn them in Python? 2 ways, I'd say. There probably is at least one guide out there that's pretty good that has it in Python. Secondly, is like once you learn the data structure, just look it up how to do it in Python. Like just look up Python's documentation and you can often find the ways to do it. Again, the concepts are transferable across languages. It's like how do you implement them though is the main thing. So you can look them up that way once you know them in whatever other language. How much coding ability should a Google product manager have? Okay, so I'm not a product manager, so I don't want to, that's a disclaimer, I don't know. A lot of the product managers that I work with have CS backgrounds, like they have CS degrees. So their coding chops are there. That's not their priority anymore. And they do very little coding nowadays, but it's really important to understand like what's possible in general. I would encourage you to go to the panels that we'll have throughout this class. Maybe we'll have a product manager there and you can ask them that question and they'll give a better response. I'd also say that the role of a product manager differs a lot between companies. Like a Google product manager is one type of thing. A Microsoft product manager is a very different type of thing, I believe. And it depends on where you are. But I would say at least with Google, having a CS background is a plus. What if your major is in a technical one? I'm gonna say it doesn't matter. If you have the chops to back it up, the skills to back it up, why does your major matter? Like some people are very successful without going to college at all. They just go to a boot camp or they learn on themselves and they can find work very well because they're just a good problem solver and a good programmer. So it would be helpful to have a major in terms of just like on your resume, like, cause it might be like, oh, this person's a CS major. It looks a little bit weird if there's like, oh, this person's like a psychology major, right? But if you can explain in the rest of your resume why you're a good candidate, then that's perfectly fine. Like, you should, then you're still very, very eligible. In fact, it might even be a plus because now you're kind of different than everyone else. Like I'm a psychology major, but I know how to code and I've done this with my coding for this psychology project, for example, right? So TLDR is, it doesn't matter. It might help a little bit with screening, but it's you know, if you were a psychology major, you should be able to back up, or any like non-technical major, your resume should back you up as to why you're still a good fit for the position. BS or BA affects someone's chance of getting an internship. So the Bachelor of Science versus Bachelor of Arts. Also, as you can see, I'm like 40 questions behind. So I'm just gonna go through all of them until people decide to, like, you can stay as long as you want, but I'll just keep going through. So feel free to dip out whenever you need to. Don't feel obligated to stay. I guess, like, I'm not a recruiter. I think that like a BS is probably more thorough than a BA in this case, because, you know, the programming and software engineering is more of a science than like an art, I'd say. That being said, it's the same thing as like the major point that I brought out. Like, if you have the chops to back it up and your resume shows that, then it shouldn't matter that much. Like, at the end of the day, we're gonna look more at your interview performance than your resume usually. Is double majoring in CS and data science, I'm assuming, good for more attention from recruiters? I'm speaking up from me, not from like Google recruiting. Like, I think so, because like then it shows you have more understanding of technical things that might come up in the workplace. Like, probably touch on a little bit of data science stuff every now and then when you're doing your job as a software engineer. And you'll work with data scientists maybe, so it may be helpful to have that background. That being said, it's obviously not the end of the world if you don't have one. But if you're interested in both, then like, that'd be cool. Is Google what you expect it to be? No, not at all. I didn't know what I was going to be until like halfway through my senior year, because I didn't have a job lined up until like January. So I was either going to be probably working at a defense company that a lot of people go to from my school near Iowa, or I don't know. But then I got lucky. And I think a lot of it is luck that I got the job that I did. And I'm really grateful for that. So it's a bit of luck. What is my favorite perk at Google? My team used to travel a lot. So on my team, I've been able to travel on Google's dime to Israel, Japan, Zurich, New York like 5 times, Washington, Seattle area. Yeah, just to name a few. And that's pretty actually unique as a software engineering position, but like that's my favorite thing about my team. In addition, the fact that my team is also super, super diverse and positive and supportive. I really like that. I think it's really cool that like in my leadership chain, I have my VP is female, my direct manager is female, and there's a lot of different representation everywhere. And I think it's really good to have that like perspective in tech. I think some teams at Google and other places too are not very diverse. And having come from one that was like that to one that is really diverse, I really do value having that as part of my team. San Fran. I do live in the SF and I work in the SF office, which is a blessing. I double majored in music. Was it relevant? Maybe as like a bit of like way to stand out, but like, I'm gonna be honest, the music major did not directly help me in my like programming pursuits at all. So if I could go back, I probably would not have majored and have more time to do other things, but I did, so here I am. Does your major really matter? Again, no. It might be, it's like more of it's like a good sign if you have a certain major, but not like, it doesn't hurt you if you're not a STEM major either. So don't go changing majors just because you want your resume to be better. Change majors if you feel like what you're studying right now is not what you want to do as a career later on, or if you're not interested in as much as like in tech, right? Are hackathons just for hacking? Depending on your definition of hacking, I would still say no. Like, university hackathons are a great way to meet companies, to meet other students, you know, doing cool things, to network, to build projects, and to win prizes. I'm at Google partially because I did really well in one hackathon in particular, and I was able to talk about my project to my Google interviewers, and they were like, "Oh wow, this is really cool." So I think that's a great way to get some projects, network a little bit, maybe win some stuff, all those things. It's not like hacking like criminal stuff. It's like hackathons, like you build a project together usually. Tips for getting an interview. Yes, I once saw in a really good YouTube video, there's 2 steps to getting a job, which is getting an interview and doing well in an interview. To get the interview, your resume needs to be good. if you know anyone at Google, not including me right now, but like if you know anyone at Google that can vouch for your experience, I'd really recommend reaching out to them and seeing if they're willing to refer you. Because what we like to say is like, you know, smart people know smart people, right? So reach out to them. I would take time, do several iterations on your resume, and make sure that your resume hits every single mandatory qualification for the job that you are applying for, as well as the preferred ones if possible. So like at Google, I think one of our mandatory qualifications for the internship program for regular internship, not STEP, is data structures and algorithms understanding. So put down on your resume that you took data structures and algorithms, and you can bold that if you want even to help your recruiter spot that, or like show, you know, list projects that you've done, show that you had that mastery. Make sure that they have every reason to invite you as a candidate, basically. If you don't do well in the technical interview, what are your chances of still being hired? I'm still here. I did really bad on my first technical interviews. I can't give you a percentage chance. I'm not on like a hiring committee, so I don't know how that works, to be honest. But what I'd say is even if you don't do well, don't give up hope. I didn't do well for 3 in a row and I'm still here. So it's possible. Can you do anything business and CS related at Google? Depends on your definition of business. That we have people dedicated to businessy things. We also have product managers who are kind of doing businessy things, but more like, I would say yes, but no one particular position besides product management comes to mind at the moment. Look into it. I'm sure people know, like people have posted about this and like can give you answers about what you could do at Google. Thank you for the information. You're very welcome. Did I know I'd travel beforehand? No, I didn't. It was a hidden perk. I joined the team because I really thought the team would be good based on the people of the team. And this is like a great extra benefit to me. What's my LinkedIn? Not his, but that's mine. I love this shameless plug. I'll post it in the Slack channel as well. It looks like 17 of you have already found me, actually. Is there any way to get feedback for interviews? Unfortunately not at Google. And there are probably some certain policies as to why this is the case. Smaller companies might be able to do this. So I would definitely encourage you to ask. And if you don't get it, please don't be too hurt about it. It's probably, there's some policy, a certain reason why we cannot do that. That being said, I'd encourage you to, if you have opportunities to do mock interviews with any people, grab them, because then you can get feedback, and that might really help in terms of getting you in the right space for the next interview to come. What are some perks of working at Google? There are many, as with other tech companies, I should also say. Free food, there's cafes that serve lunch always and breakfast and sometimes even dinner. Obviously not now during the whole COVID situation. There are snacks. We have micro kitchens, which are stacked full of beverages and snacks you can just go take from. We have good financial benefits. Those are, the tax stuff is fun to talk about sometimes, but Google pays pretty well in terms of its engineering positions. Yeah, I could say more, but I would look up what the benefits are because someone has listed them out, and there are many. Do interns get to pick their site? Interns can show preference for a site, but they don't get to say I will only. I think they can list which ones they want to work at, and then the potential intern host will go through and see the ones based on where they are located, which interns they can take from that, basically. So if you do get to the host matching phase of internships, I would really encourage you to be open about where you go, because if you're too specific, you may lose your chance of getting an internship. So just be a little open. And remember, it is an internship. You can, if you come back full time, then you can talk about going somewhere else, right? I will also say that because of COVID, I don't know what's gonna happen next year or in the winter and spring, but maybe they're open to doing remote internships, because obviously we can't bring our interns to the Bay Area because that's not very safe for them. We want them to be safe. You live in New York, but the MTV site would be more appealing. Yeah, I think definitely checking out the headquarters is really, really cool. And especially internship just to get a little taste of it would be really a cool thing to do. How soon can you apply to Google after being rejected? I don't know the exact time. They should say, and if you get rejected, they should say then. Or you can ask your recruiter and they'll tell you. I think it's half a year, but that might be wrong, and it might also be position dependent. But you should look it up just to be sure. Don't take my word for final truth there. What do you think helped you the most to land your position at Google? The most. I do think getting the interview is harder than doing well in the interview, just because I know a lot of people, like I struggled to even get an interview in the first place, actually. So it's really just demonstrating your passion for technology, like, you know, doing side projects, doing hackathons. If you don't have an like joining organizations that are around software engineering, like, you know, ACM, IEEE, Women in Computer Science, National Society of Black Engineers, Society of Hispanic, and Society of Professional Hispanic Engineers. I might get the H and the P mixed around. Like those organizations, joining those, putting them on your resume. If you can be a leadership role in one of them, even better. But just really showing like you're passionate about the space as a student. Going to Grace Hopper, going to, you know, other conferences around computing for college students, right? Just demonstrating that passion, I think is very, very helpful. Yeah, that's what I'd say to that. And if those organizations don't exist at your school, create them. I created the hackathon organization at my school, not because I wanted to help me. I was actually pretty good at the time, by the time I created it, but I think it was just good to have one at my school because it didn't have one. I think it's actually since disbanded, but like, you know, it served a purpose for a while. I would hope it helped some students out at least. Go Hawkeyes, right on. Mintwater, or I don't know how to pronounce LaCroix. I can't pronounce. My French is non-existent. The latter, LaCroix, because they're both actually free at Google in the micro kitchens. My micro kitchen does not have Mintwater or Hintwater. I'm not sure which one you're referring to actually. But it does have the LaCroix as well as the bubbly one. Though I'm not at work anymore because I work from home all the time because of COVID, but those are my favorites. How did I become good enough to, in programming to nail the interviews? For a while, I told you, like I sucked. I was using Java. I didn't know how to code in Java. And then one day I was like, okay, I'm sucking so much at interviews. Why not just study? So I took like a week and just grinded through cracking the coding interview, did every single problem, learned all the method names in Java, learned all the data structure implementations in Java, just spent all this time studying for like 1 week. And it was a really good investment of my time because I was able to do well interviews since then, basically. Might be 3 months for the reapplying thing. Good call. I don't know. I would look it up. Do you need products internships? No. It's a bit of a catch-22 because like you need work experience to get a job. Like you need a job to get work experience. Projects will help, but it's really about just landing that first internship that will help you a lot, I think. If I have a piece of advice in terms of your college like career and how to set yourself up as getting a job post-college in engineering, try to get an internship at least by junior summer. Because a lot of the times in this space, your junior summer internship will become your at least one full-time offer going to senior year. And that'll set you up very, very nicely if you want to stay at the company or go to other companies as well. But you need to get one at first, right? And like, you know, companies know that. So they don't necessarily expect you to have internship experience, but if you do, it's a huge plus, right? How did you bridge the gap between theoretical programming and industry? I think this class is actually kind of the answer to that. Like I didn't take this class personally because I didn't know about it coming out of college, but we're focusing a lot on the like more industry stuff here, like the interviews and those types of things versus the theory. I think the theory has its place, but we really want to focus on like how can we use that knowledge and the data structures and algorithms to get solutions for problems in the real world. So do good, like try to do good in your classes, like in all the theory classes you might have to take, but also take the time outside of class, like you're doing right now, this class, this, you know, CodePath, to learn the industry stuff, like how to actually use them practically. Thank you. Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers. How does the project matching process work? I can't reveal like too much about it, but basically as an intern candidate, if you get past the interviews, you can fill out a questionnaire about like, your preferences, what your skills are, any additional details about you. And then as intern hosts, we can basically do host matching interviews and see who's a good fit. And then we have, the hosts get interns. So that's a bit how it works. Sorry, I can't be super specific, but that's the best I can do. How many hours per week practicing do you recommend as aspiring developers? As many as it takes. Some people do it endlessly. Some people have a more natural aptitude, but I really want to destroy this belief that some people are not meant to be programmers or developers, because that's not true. People think different ways, people learn different ways, and it's really important to understand what works for you. And if your goal is to try being a software engineer, then yes, growth mindset. Then you should put in the time that it takes to get to that level, and you will see results. It might take some time. Opportunity might have to come, but it will, you can definitely do it. But did I miss any? Okay. Do you recommend taking a gap semester? I've heard a lot about this. I'm not a student anymore, and I'm very sympathetic to you guys that you have to deal with this whole COVID situation, and maybe you don't go back to school in person. I did not take a gap semester, but I do think I know some people who have taken a gap semester to do an internship, and what's cool about it is because I think you would graduate in 4.5 years usually, is you can intern during your spring semester, let's say, and then you intern a different place in your summer break, and then you come back to school because you meet the qualification that you're going back to school. So now you have 2 different chances to try different companies out and maybe get a return offer for full-time when you graduate. So I think it's a cool thing to try if it makes sense to you, but it's not necessary by any means. Masters in CS and no experience in the industry, just academic projects and self-learning ones too. How are the chances that you get an interview? So I would try to, academic projects are fine if they're substantial. If you have a senior design project that takes an entire semester, like I did, I put that on my resume, so that was really impressive. I would try to replace them with some other ones that might be helpful. What I'll say is there's a window of time after you graduate with your last degree where you're considered a new grad. And it would behoove you to try to get your job in that window of time. This also includes when you're a student. You have a window of time you're a student, and the pool of candidates for those positions is smaller, or the bar is lower, basically. So it'd behoove you to try to work on your resume enough and eventually your interviewing skills to get the interviews and get the job in that narrow window of time. I think it's usually 2 years after you graduate when you're considered a new grad usually, but it's definitely possible. The chances of it happening, it's company to company, honestly. And I'm not saying I should probably do this now, but you need to look at your resume and see how competitive it is and how well it meets those qualifications, but it certainly is possible. One thing you wish you knew when you were a student now as an engineer. I think I'd focus more on intention. When you're in college, or at any point in your life, is why are you doing the very thing that you're doing right now? Why are you taking this CodePath class? You're probably taking this CodePath class for at least maybe one reason is to improve as a developer and to kind of get yourself to the next level in terms of programming abilities and understanding, set yourself up well for interviews to come for internships and jobs. But I definitely wasted a lot of time in college. And I think had I not done that, my job interview process, my job hunting process would have been a lot less stressful. I might have had better opportunities. I could have negotiated my offer higher or something like that. But just really being intentional with my time. That would be one thing I would reflect on. That's more of a life thing. But I wish I did know that as a student, so I could have reevaluated where I spent my time. Do you know how hard it is to get a job without an internship after graduation? It is harder because often a preferred qualification is work experience or an internship. I can't empathize personally because I did get an internship before I graduated. but it's certainly possible to still get a job without one, right? If you don't have an internship, there are a lot of other ways you can kind of get technical experience while being in school. So you could maybe be like the webmaster for one of your departments at your school, or work in your IT department, or do research for a professor. I did research for a professor as well, that used some amount of coding, right? You're able to make a little bit of money. Usually research positions pay pretty well, and also get that experience too. So if you need like a different out, those might be good ways to do that as well. There are also other experience-based programs like Google Summer of Code that some will pay you, some will not, but will help you get that experience and kind of are like an internship. Is a web developer process different? I'm not sure what the Google web developer process is like. I think there are some positions like that, but in general, we like to think of people at Google as very strong generalists. So if you picked me up and put me on a different team, I would do pretty well with some ramp up. Like I could catch on and be able to contribute meaningfully. If in general, if it's a specific position, you'll probably get certain questions, and the process will be probably tailored to that position. I use machine learning as an example, but really anything is like that, I think. Crucial advice would you tell your younger self as an aspiring software engineer developer if you could? I think for me personally, it'd be to like meet more people that are doing what I'm doing. I waited until my like end of junior year / early senior year to start like meeting my colleagues in school and like meeting people at hackathons. And I think had I done that before, it's like really, it's more fun to like work with other people for me. And like having that accountability and having that network would keep me more invested in coding, I think. I turned out okay, I think, but that would have been more helpful for me to be into it. Okay, someone's recommending the Think series by Alan Downey. Yeah, definitely check it out. What would your second favorite company to work at be? If I could pick a company to work for, I'm not very familiar with their like how the culture is or what the benefits are, but a product that I love is Spotify. I'm very into music. I love Spotify, and I would be, yeah, I think it'd be interesting to work there because I love music. If you were unable to apply for internships due to visa status, continue building experience and resume. Yeah, I'd say like your career is like, even now, I'd say that this is part of your career because you're just learning things, right? And some of you may be employed, but it's okay if you're not. Continuing to just build your skills for when the opportunity is right. Like, so maybe visa status is a blocker. I know that Google, even with their interns, will do our very best to place people where they can work. Google has offices all around the world: Zurich, Tokyo, Munich, Bay Area, New York, Bangalore, Sydney, like London, everywhere, right? And so there's probably somewhere you can work, but even not Google, like, other companies as well. So just because the path that work right now may be kind of bleak, I would not give up because of that. Like, the opportunity will come, right? Advice for people looking to break into security and network engineering. I am really bad at those topics personally. I hope that some of the panels in the future that are coming your guys' way, so again, plug, please attend those. You'll learn get a lot more insight from people who are way more in the industry than I am even. Any advice is, I think the main ones are obviously like study that material and try to figure out what information that I say this kind of hesitantly, like figure out what kind of questions we will ask, not necessarily the exact questions, but like what we kind of test for. I'm sure there are specific questions about those topics, and people probably share their experience online. While I don't endorse breaking NDAs, I would say I do endorse like using what you have available to you to best prepare yourself. What do you dislike about working at Google? I think one downside of big companies is that you tend to move slow. Startups, you can move really, really quickly, get things at the door. You have a lot more control over what's going on. Bigger companies, there's a lot more process. Things move slowly. So that can kind of be a little frustrating to deal with. I think with so many people at a company, there's also people who disagree with you. And while I'd say majority of people at Google are good people, there are going to be some people you don't like as much or disagree with. So that's the unfortunate reality of it. But I accept that as like, that's what happens with a big company. Master of one or jack of all trades as a professional. I think I'm gonna go back to my Spanish phrase of porque no los dos, even though it's kind of like a one or the other, right? I think you should be really good at one thing. Like you try, like, really deep dive into one thing that can impress to show you have the depth there. Like, and when I was in college, I learned how to build Alexa skills because I was like voice interfaces are so cool, and I did hackathons with Alexa skills all the time, and I was able to talk about those in my interviews. But also being able to pick up other things quickly is really important too. So I'd say probably more of the first, but the second is also very valid. Spotify recruiters in the chat. I'm not interested in changing jobs right now, but thank you very much. I plan to become system software engineer. So system software engineer, I want to focus on OS and mobile devices. What advice would I give? As someone who doesn't know the system side of things of mobile devices or the operating systems very well, is the internet is your friend. Quora is your friend. There are people who have asked these questions before you, and if not, ask on Quora, and you'll get so much great advice from people who have been there and can give you really articulate things. As someone who doesn't do those things, I don't want to give you unqualified advice. But the thing I will say is, like, find projects that you can do at your level that can help propel you forward and like show that you're interested in this and that you're good at it too. Is there a golden window for applying for internships? I would say when they open is my answer. Most internships have a certain number of spots, like a certain number we can hire, any company really. And when they're full, they're full. So when they open the applications, you should apply as soon as you can, or as soon as you're ready, because again, once they're full, then you don't get a position. You have no chance. I have friends who have been close to getting jobs, but then because they filled up, it just stopped the process, and they're like, "We filled up. We're sorry. Please apply again next year." And this is not necessarily Google, other companies as well. So the golden window is usually between like August and October, I'd say, for internships, because most applications open in August or September. With Google, you can put alerts to see when jobs open or when jobs are posted that match your experience. So you could get an email alert, or I think maybe even a text alert when they post the internship opportunity. Can you have my LinkedIn? Oh, wait, go back. Data structures and algorithms concepts gave me the most trouble. If you take an algorithms class or a data structures class, you'll probably learn about random things like red-black trees and like all these weird things. Everyone uses red-black trees as an example. Usually, I'd say the ones that are most important data structure-wise are like array/list, linked list maybe. That's not as common actually. I think sets, maps or hash tables, trees, and stacks, queues, all those things. The ones that give me the most trouble, I would say I'm going to change it up and say the thing that actually gave the most trouble is probably like weird string manipulation problems and like regex stuff. That stuff for a while, like what you could do with it was a little tricky to me just because I wasn't very familiar with Java. But after learning Java more, it became better. But string manipulation is is an important part of interviewing as well. LinkedIn, yes, I'll post it in the Slack channel. Specific open source projects do you recommend joining? I recommend checking out Google Summer of Code. I'll disclaimer, I'm not very much in the open source community. I probably should be more. But Google Summer of Code will actually give you a stipend to work on an open source project, which is really great. So you get the work experience and you get some money. So if you don't get an internship, that's a great alternative. Like I'm going to default my answer to the other kind of default answers, which is like ask people on the panel because they have a lot of more better informed answers for some of these things. And also just Google it online, like, see what's popular for young developers to contribute to. Because you definitely can, even at your level, whatever it might be, contribute meaningfully to open source. So check it out if you're interested. Recruiters hesitate to choose someone with experience at a startup. I don't, as an entry-level position, I don't think it matters because like what experience do you have? Like usually we're looking for people with experience, but at least the minimum qualification. So like usually a degree of some kind. So not always, by the way, or proficiency in one programming language and data structures and algorithms expertise. So it can be helpful maybe, but it doesn't actually matter for like entry level. If you're talking more like upper level, like technically yes, like I think it'd be kind of it might be easier to convince like hiring a VP who was a VP at like a big company versus like a startup, right? Because the VP at the big company has more experience, in reference to Google, by the way, managing a company of that size. So at the high levels, maybe, but I don't think you should, I wouldn't dwell on it too much, that you're worried about which company to go to because of that. Do you know what types of questions are asked for internships like Google Stack and Twitter University? Is LeetCode Premium worth for aspiring interns? I only used HackerRank and Cracking the Coding Interview. I actually have never opened up LeetCode, so I don't know what LeetCode is like. If you think it's worth the investment, like money and time wise, then like I would definitely encourage you to check it out. They may even have like a student pricing too, which would be great, right? It's not necessary by any means. The types of questions they ask, since the bar is lower, they tend to ask easier questions. They might not even ask questions that rely on data structures, algorithm knowledge, because we don't require that. I would look at what the requirements are for those programs and then understand the questions will not go over those requirements usually. That being said, interviewers at Google are allowed to pick their own questions usually, at least for the general interview, because we know how to best assess the candidates we're given. So it might be different from interviewer to interviewer, right? What if you had an internship, but you have not learned as much on it? That was my internship, actually. I didn't learn a whole lot, to be honest. And that's okay, right? Sometimes even having a not so good internship lets you know maybe what you don't want to do, right? Or what you are not interested in. But learning it's still value to be gained from it. And you get the experience of working in a real world job, like a real life setting, which I think is pretty valuable. If you don't learn anything of value, this kind of goes with like, if you feel behind in any way, like that's imposter syndrome playing on you. Like you're actually probably not behind, but I would encourage you to use that like fear and as fuel to learn more and to better yourself and to catch up, even though you're probably not actually behind. That will take you a long way. And that imposter syndrome never ends. I have imposter syndrome literally every day at work because the people at work around me are really, really good at what they do. And I'm like, how do I stack up to them? And that helps push me a little bit to be better, you know? And if you then look back after a year, you'll realize, wow, you came so far, actually. You've done so much, you've learned so much. So a little bit of a roundabout answer, but basically it's fine if you didn't learn too much in your internship, like as long as you keep moving forward. Okay, wow, that was a whirlwind of a Q&A. If you have more questions, I'll hang around. Honestly, I'll keep answering until everyone's left the chat, or we feel like there's no more questions for a while, but thanks again for coming. And I'll upload some of those replets and question answers in the Slack channel. Like communication and comprehension, for example, like, can you communicate to your interviewer what your process is like, right? Are you able to eloquently explain in regular terminology or like some coding terminology what you're thinking about, what your solution is? Are you respectful? Like, usually candidates tend to be respectful, maybe because they're a little bit afraid or like a little bit nervous. But I've had some candidates that are a little arrogant, and it doesn't feel great as an interview. And those interviews actually tend to not go very well anyway, because then they get frustrated maybe or whatever. Yeah, but being respectful to your interviewer is kind of a basic thing. Comprehending things. Are you able to, if I give you a hint, can you take my hint and like understand what that means and then kind of go off of it? Or if I explain something to you, can you understand what I just said and like use that information wisely as you solve the problem? So those are some ways. And this is kind of at the more standardized interview, like so for like bigger companies or companies that use that kind of system. Some interviews might be different. I've had interviews where like the entire day you just work on a project and then you get quizzed about the project and like maybe how you interact with them or how you carry yourself, like are you rude to other people? Like again, kind of respect thing, but like being a good person. You don't have a long window to show, but like, are you able to be a good person in that window, right? If you think about it, an interview is kind of scary because for standard interviews, which are 45 minutes, you have 45 minutes to prove to someone that they should hire you. That is not a lot of time. So there is like very little room for not being respectful or for big red flags like that. Making mistakes is fine, but like big red flags, like no, like disrespect, those things is like, that's not good. Any tips for what to do if you have no idea how to solve an interview question? Ask for examples, ask for hints. It's okay. It's okay if you don't know, like sometimes you're just kind of having like a little brain fart. Like, okay, can you give me another example? And maybe that'll help jog your memory. Remember that the interview is more like a discussion, at least to me. And if you need some help, you can ask for a hint. It's not the end of the world if they give you a hint, right? Or if you can ask them to re-explain the problem. Admittedly, the question that I ask can be a little convoluted. And I've had many of my candidates ask me to repeat it or give them examples, and I'm happy to do that to get them off on the right foot. Because as the interviewer, I want to see them succeed just as, not maybe just as much, but I want them to succeed as well as they want to succeed too, right? We both want to see them being successful. So I'm happy to help in that way. How do I whiteboard effectively in a way that emulates the interview process at home? Pen and paper is one way to do it. A lot of companies, including Google, are starting to do some allowing candidates, even on sites, to do coding interviews, like typing into a computer. Obviously, with the COVID, a lot of interviews are now remote, so we have to do them online. You can't, like, we don't expect you to have a whiteboard. The days of whiteboard coding are becoming more and more dated, but it's not a bad skill to have. But yeah, pen and paper and just talking through it, right? Would you recommend to get an interview? What would you recommend to get ready in an interview in a few months as a beginner? Pick a language you're going to interview it, master it, understand what you understand like what you can do with that language and how to implement everything. Understand the common algorithms and data structures, as well as their time complexities. This is assuming it's not for EP or STEP, by the way. It's like a regular internship. Practice by yourself, practice on HackerRank or LeetCode or those sites, practice with a friend, practice talking aloud, what you're doing. It's one thing to solve the problem quietly in the comfort of your own home. It's another thing to have to almost nonstop talk about your solution to someone else for like 35 minutes. So practice. How do I know if programming is a better major for me? If you can afford to, and there's obviously like financial and time restrictions with this, take a class and try it out, see if you like it. At the end of the day, your major is just an area of study. And unless you're planning on going into academia, and even if you are, like it's more of a credential. In terms of what you do with that credential, that's up to you. Like, we have people at Google who have psychology, they just have a psychology major and they're programmers. We have many people are CS majors. We have people who are physics majors, math majors, right? It's what you do with that matters. What you do with those skills you learn in college or outside of college. Only switch if you feel like it's, if that's the right move for you. And if you want to try it, I would encourage you to take a class in that space that's more representative of what it is and see if you like it. If you don't like it, maybe it's not for you. If you can get through cracking the coding interview, will you be in great shape for a Google interview? I think you'll be in better shape. I think they teach you a lot about how to treat interviews. The author, Gail Lockman, I forgot the name. Someone stole my cracking the coding interview book a long time ago, so I don't have the book anymore. But they teach you how to kind of go through them and give you a lot of problems with explanations of how to solve them. Common problems with every single data structure you might use or algorithm. So I think it's a great resource, actually. It's not gonna nothing will guarantee you success in the interviewing game. You're just increasing your chances of success. Can you recommend a better site that helped you the most as a programmer? site, there are two. The first one is the documentation site for whichever programming language you choose. And sorry, let's say three. That first is documentation. Understand what you can do with the language you're using. Second is, I would encourage you to find what I call like a big O cheat sheet. So this will show you all of the operations you can do with data structures and algorithms, and the big O's or time complexities, and sometimes, space complexities for all of those things, and just kind of memorize it. Also understand why it's that way, but at least memorizing is a good start. And then the third one, it'd be like your HackerRank or your Elite Code, like a practicing site. Can I give you a mock interview? I'm unfortunately going to say no to this one because, oh, please, I'm still going to have to say no because I don't think it's very scalable or fair to give one person an interview, and then if 200 other people asking for an interview, that I don't have the time to do that, unfortunately. What I would say is I would really rely on your friends and your colleagues in the software industry. And if you don't have any, ask your parent or ask your guardian. Like, they don't have to know what's going on, but just you practicing this talking thing is really, really helpful, actually. Unfortunately, I can't do it in this time. We have certain Google programs that I do assist with. And in those circumstances, I give mock interviews to certain students, but they have to be part of those programs. And that's something I commit my time to. I can't, unfortunately, commit time to give 200 mock interviews. So sorry about that one. Does Google offer mentorship opportunities? Yes, it does. I'm going to assume you mean, actually, let me rephrase. I'm assuming you mean for students. We do have certain programs in place. I'll try to link some of them in the Slack that you might be interested in checking out. That will have some kind of maybe like mentorship or like interaction with Googlers. But we don't have like a definitive program where like a student can get paired up with a Googler for mentorship. If you become an employee of Google, we have many mentorship programs in place for Google employees to get mentored by more senior Google employees and so forth. So yeah. Is cracking the coding interview overkill for STEP? I'm gonna say yes. That being said, it will still help you if you read it and like work through the problems, because it's like you might be overqualified for STEP. And if you do well enough in the STEP interview, you could even do the regular internship program, maybe. Maybe they might take you from the STEP pipeline into the regular suite internship pipeline, and then you'll get probably paid more, and you'll get to do cooler things and have more, you'll be more of like you'll be working on harder things. It will look better. The work will be more challenging for you, right? We want to put you in the program that best fits you. So, big O cheat sheet, nice. When is the best time to ask for a referral? When for internships or for any for new grad positions is when those applications open up. Like, then they can submit your referral for you, and then you'll get an invitation to apply usually, and then when people look at your application, they'll see your referral, whatever your referrer says, and also as well as your application. So that time would be best, I think. Coolest project I've worked on. I no longer work on this project, but in the iOS version of Google Maps, at least, I had the opportunity to work on showing crises on Google Maps. So if there was a hurricane, it would show like the hurricane icon and like the cone coming out of it. If you've tapped into it, if there's like a shooting near you, God forbid, hopefully, but like we would show you that there's a shooting near you, and you can see more information about it and get resources and stuff like that. I was also, because of that, I got to go to Tel Aviv and work with people there, which is really cool. And it's really cool to work on something that is genuinely helping people and helping keep people safe. So that was pretty sick. Does getting an internship at Google make it easier to get a subsequent one? Yes. If you're like the STEP program or even a regular SWE intern and you can come back for another internship in the future, you're eligible. Then if you do well with your first internship, you could potentially come back for a second one without even interviewing, maybe, if you do well enough. So yes, getting one internship at Google makes returning a lot easier, provided you do well, of course. Will you be able to return offer for internship? Yes. Yeah, so that's kind of what I just said. If you do well in the first time, then it's very likely they'll give you an offer to come back for the next time. And you can change locations. I know people who interned in the Bay Area, and the next summer they wanted to go to Zurich, so they somehow got to do that, which there's some hoops there. You can change locations. Usually you don't go back to the same team. I recommend to try different things out as an intern, just so you can kind of see what you like and what you don't like. But yeah, it's easier. Does it make a difference if I'm a software engineer or a computer science major? Software engineering or computer science major, again, there's no difference. It's like what skills do you learn from them? Like if you take if you're a psychology major, for example, you're probably not going to encounter the type of stuff you would encounter in interviews in your classes, right? Just because they're not going to cover that. If you're a CS major, you'll probably encounter more of those, right? I think software engineering and computer science probably have similar courses, and you'll encounter what you would need to apply to internships at Google, full-time jobs at Google, and other tech companies. But I think those two are probably about the same. As an international student, would I be able to return with like a work visa or something like that? Some companies are willing to sponsor you. Google is one of them, usually, even for internships. So again, we have companies all over the world. If we want to hire you, if you like meet the bar and we want to hire you, we will do everything we can to hire you and to bring you on board. So we will get through the visa stuff and all of that, right? What is my favorite Google tradition? Okay, I guess I'll say maybe not so much now anymore, but like we have this thing called, we have like a company meeting basically every once in a while, and it's really cool to hear from our leaders talking to us. There's some Q&A. They always, if you're watching it from an office, they always have like really good food, really good like drinks and stuff like that, which is great. Yeah, it is referred to as, I think it's pretty public now, some occasion. It's called TGIF. But it's really cool to see what's going on in the company, hear our leaders talk about, the issues that are happening around us. Sometimes there's something that really big that comes that we need to address as a company. And so they talk to us about it. And it's really cool to be able to hear like Sundar talking to us. I've gotten to ask Sundar one question and I was pretty paralyzed, actually. It's really intimidating. He's such a nice guy, but like, it's so like intimidating to talk to someone that high up for me. How hard is it to transfer between Google locations as a professional? It's easier the more experience you have. Like once you're as a new grad, it's maybe a little bit harder, but once you're at least we call L4, which is like the like an independent contributor, like you can do most things on your own. More teams will be willing to hire you and bring you on board, and then if Google is able to, they'll move you. Like if you wanted to move somewhere else, Google will probably help you with it, unless there's like a weirdly large number of restrictions or you cannot do it for like legally. Then they'll probably do their best to assist you. There are several internship opportunities and you do not qualify for a position. If based on your interview feedback, they think you're better for a different position, they will change you to that. They'll ask you and they'll change you to that pipeline. So for example, when I started out, I was actually a regular SWE full-time candidate, but I messed up on some interviews. So they're like, okay, maybe the engineering residency program is better for you. So they put me in that pipeline instead. So yes, they'll do that. And you can also ask your recruiter, if you're interested in multiple programs, how you can interview in such a way to maybe qualify for any of them or different ones. How hard is it to go from L3 to L4? Depends on the person. Depends on a lot of things really. I know people that have done it in half a year. I know people that have done it in 4 years. I think on average, it's maybe between like 1.5 to 2 years, 2.5, maybe 2.5. Promotion that and L3 to L4 is not that big of as big of a gap as like L4 to L5. That's a bigger gap, and like the subsequent ones are also bigger. But within like 2 years, I think it's a pretty good chance, assuming you're performing well and getting better at what you're doing. Is programming all you do at Google, or is there other tasks? Okay, so maybe those of you who have had internships can kind of attest to this. When you work at a company, the code base is usually really big. Even for startups, it can be like pretty, like, hundreds of thousands of lines long. And a lot of your time is going to be spent reading code to figuring out what is going on. And once you figure it out, you have to figure out where you need to put your small changes in to make the thing you want to happen. So a lot of my time is actually spent reading code. Also spent time meeting with people to make sure we're aligned on what we're doing. And then, yeah, some of my time is spent coding as well. The higher up you go in the like in your rank, like L3, L4, L5, and so on, the less you will probably code. The more design decisions you have to make, the more management you have to do. So that's one thing to consider as well. How do I go about asking strangers for referrals? I did not personally do this because I wasn't super comfortable with doing it. I think as a student or as a person trying to get a job, like you should do everything you can that makes sense to get that job. I think spamming random people who work at the company isn't always the best way to do that. I think if you have a connection with them, it's like a good start. Like, oh, we know this person, da da da, you know, and make a case for why they should refer you. Why they should take the time to refer someone they don't know very well to Google. And if there's a way you can prove to them that you are a qualified candidate, then that will help more. I will say with many referral systems, not necessarily Google, but like usually when you refer someone, they ask, how do you know this person? So like if they say, I don't really know this person, it doesn't help that much actually. But just like be smart about it. Don't be disrespectful and kind of show them that they should refer you, and also respect the fact that they may say no, and that's okay. Best time to negotiate your salary as a programmer. I don't have a ton of experience in this field personally. So what I'll do is I'll refer you to there are people who do this, who have written great Medium articles about it. I'd encourage you to read those and go about them. They'll have whatever advice I have is not gonna help nearly as much compared to their advice. If a random student from your university asks you for a referral, how would you want them to ask? Maybe you went to my university, I don't know. But in general, I personally would want to have some kind of connection to them. Maybe they're a part of an organization that I did, or they're part of a major I did, or like they know someone else that knows me or something like that. Again, just like I'm not really in the place to give mock interviews to every single person that's organized in the CodePath class. Like I'm not in a place to refer every single person in this class. So like I will kind of be hesitant if people do ask me to refer them. That being said, if I have like a strong case for someone in this class is like, would be a good candidate for this position, I would be happy to refer them that way. But then keeping in mind, like I only able to kind of meet you guys through these classes and some like these kind of functions. So my knowledge of how strong and proficient you are as a programmer and as a developer is pretty limited. So I don't know how helpful my referral could even be. That being said, I will say, in addition to me, there's at least one other Googler who teaches in this class. His name is Alec. He'll be teaching, at least, if he hasn't taught you already, he'll be teaching you soon. He's a great guy. He works in a different role as me, same software engineering, but also like a different field. And he'll have a lot of great insights to it. I definitely recommend asking questions to him as well to get his opinion on these things. Yeah. Has Google covered the tuition if you want to complete your master's, PhD, or move to a better position? If you are a Googler who's trying to seek further education, Google has a certain stipend for you to use in pursuing that education. If it's role related, so getting like a master's degree in the same field you're in is definitely role related. They will pay for a certain portion of that. As you are a Googler, you have to be working at the same time. You can't take time off. From what I understand, they will not reimburse you for getting a degree and then working at Google. We do have a policy though of paying people with higher level of degrees. We're compensating them more base-wise before negotiation than people with lower degrees. So getting the higher degree does have some benefit in terms of direct compensation initially, at least. Is FUBAR real? I haven't encountered it personally. If you get it, so for people who don't know, FUBAR is like I think it's a challenge that will appear in your like Google search if Google thinks that you're like I think it's like speaking our language or whatever, and they'll give you like a quiz, and if you do well, then they'll like forward you to like interviews or something like that. I can't say I've seen it, but I would check the web, and if enough people say they've seen it, it's probably real. Yeah. So. Okay. I'll give 20 seconds for people to type out any last questions. I will be teaching you guys, I think, 3 more times. So I'll be back again, I think probably in 2 weeks, Tuesday. But yeah, if there are no more questions in like 30 seconds, I think we're good to call it a night. Everyone gets some sleep, whatever time it is for you. I'm personally gonna go eat dinner. It's 9 p.m. You need to be in software, so happy to help. Does Google do pipeline recruiting with the capture the flag, I think is what that is. I think I've heard something about capture the flag. I don't know is the answer I'm going to give. I don't want to tell you yes or no because I'm not sure what the answer is there, but I would encourage you to look around. Again, also you can ask Alec. He'll be teaching you sometime soon, hopefully, and he might know as well. Thank you all for staying this late, for those who have, and good luck with the problems, and I'll see you in 2 weeks.